Welcome to episode 2 of the Wi-Fi scanner project. So in this we are going to see how to use the display, that is we are going to see how to use a TFT display, and we are going to use 2.8-inch 240 by 320 TFT display. This has a support for SD card as well as touch screen. So the reason for using this is that later on in the further versions we're going to enhance the project and try to use touch options also, but for today we are going to only use the normal SPI pins, and we are going to use ESP32 for this, as we have been using this for the other videos. If you have watched my episode 1 where we have used ESP32 to scan the Wi-Fi network and display the Wi-Fi along with the Wi-Fi SSIDs along with the relative strength and the MAC address and other informations. So we are going to use that project and enhance further and display those information on the display TFT display. But for episode 2 we are just going to see how to set up the framework and make sure that display runs properly and we are able to run the GUI and other stuff, the libraries and all are working fine. So this episode 2 will mainly be focused on the building for the episode 3, where we will actually display the Wi-Fi details on this screen. So before further delay, let's connect the pins and then start our project. So we'll get back. Let me pause the video and I will connect the wires, the pins, and then we'll come back on this. So now I have connected the wires, and if you can see that I am using red wire for VCC, brown is for ground, and for VCC we are using 5 volt of ESP32. Some board may support 3.3 only, but this one is 5 volt. This supports 5 volt. The black is for CS, green, yellow and orange respectively for reset, DC and MOSI. Then white is for the the SCK. LED we are connecting to gray wire, and the purple is for MISO. And the corresponding wires on ESP32, I'm not sure whether if you can see the pin numbers, but we are using that VCC as 5 volt and the LED is 3.3 and the ground for to ground wire. So the CS and I'm not sure what, I think let me just zoom it if you can see the pin numbers. So the CS is GPIO 5 and the reset is GPIO 4. DC is pin number 2, the yellow wire if you can see, GPIO 2. Then the MOSI is GPIO 23. SCK is GPIO 18, that is the white wire is 18. Then the MISO is GPIO 19. So I will show all these pin connections on the screen also shortly. So before further delay, let's hit to the system and see the code that we are using for this one, and I will see step by step how to install the drivers and troubleshoot if there is any issues, and we'll show the output shortly. We need to do. So we have already covered this first step for this project, the episode 2 of the Wi-Fi scanner, where we are going to see how to configure the display as mentioned earlier, how to use the TFT display. So the wiring we have already done, and as mentioned for the wiring, the pin connections that we are using, let me show that. So as I mentioned earlier, so we are using VCC, so not 3.3, we are using VCC for as a 5 volt, ground to ground, CS pin of display with the GPIO 5, reset pin with GPIO 4, DC with GPIO 2, MOSI SDI, that is MOSI with GPIO 23, SCK with GPIO 18, SDO, that is MISO with GPIO 19, and the LED pin is with 3.3 volt of ESP32. So this is the wiring that we have done so far, and as I have shown earlier in the video. Next step is installing and configuring the library. So for today, for this project, we are going to use TFT ESPI library. If this library doesn't work for you, there is another alternative, that is the Adafruit library, but the display that I'm using will support this one. And if you're watching from India, I think this library should work on the displays, most of the display that is available over here in India. Otherwise you can try the other Adafruit display library also. So let's launch Arduino and then see this installation step. So for installing the library, we need to go to the manage library, and this is same as uh, the other video I have shown. So go to manage library and we'll search, since we are going to install TFT ESPI, and we are using this library by Bodmer. So this is I have installed before that, so it's showing me remove. So you will see the install button here, and just like this one, you just install this one. Once you are done, then you are ready with that library. So as I mentioned, this library should work. Otherwise you can install the Adafruit library. So for Adafruit, we are going to use Adafruit library, this particular chip. So again, this will depend on what chip your display is using. So if you are using ILI9341 chip, then I think this library should work. Otherwise, depending on the other, there are few other similar libraries. But for today, we are going to use that TFT ESPI. So this library we are going to use. So once your installation is done, then the next step is to move into the actual folder and make some changes. So what we are going to do is, we are going to just modify or make sure that the config is correct. So just open the library folder. It should be under documents. So under documents, Arduino libraries, open the TFT ESPI and then move into user setup select.h. So if you go down in this file, so we are going to change, make sure that the right include file is there. So for changing this, I am using Visual Studio Code, but you can use any other editor. So what we are going to do is that we just need to make sure that this file user has include user underscore setup.h is enabled, and rest all other include files are commented out. So we are not going to use any other include file for this project, and just comment out by default. If you open, if after just installation, I think this should be uncommented and rest all should be commented out. If not, then you just comment everything else and just keep this include file. Don't make any other change in this file. There are few all the other thing, leave it as it is. So that's the change that we need to do in this one. And once this is done, then the next step will be to open the user setup.h file. So this will be also in the same folder. Some version you may find it in some other folder, but for the version which I have installed, it is there within the same folder. So you open this one and copy paste, just replace the earlier text and paste it this one. This I will upload in the GitHub. You can download from there and use this. One thing to note is that if you are using this particular chip, if your display is using this ILI9341 chip, then use this command. Or if your driver, like if your display is using ST7789, then use this one. There are some other options also. I will show in the later video. We mentioned there are two more version of this one, but the one which I am using is using this ST7789. So I have added this line and commented out the other one. Copy as it is. This is based on the pin connection that I have shown earlier, the different pins that I am using. Based on that, this config is set up. If you are using some other pin, then you may need to tweak this file. But if you're following my video, I think you just copy paste this and replace the earlier text in the user_setup.h with this file, with this content. Later on in the next episode 3 and 4, going forward, I will replace this with our custom.h file. But for this episode 2, to make it simple, I am using the existing file and just replacing the content over there. So once this second step part is done, like installing the library, making sure your setup select.h is having the right include file, and then the third in the setup user_setup.h, updating this content based on the pin connections that we are using. So once this all these are done, the next step will be to run the sample code. So once these are done, that is it in the configuration. So one thing to note is that for this updating these files, I am using Visual Studio Code, which was because I have that file, tool installed in my system, and that is a default editor for all the .h files. So it opened on that, and I am editing on over there. You can use Arduino IDE also, or you can use any other editor to modify these files. But I will suggest to install Visual Studio Code and use that, so that will be easier, because in the later projects we are going to use that tool extensively along with Arduino IDE. So we are now done with the second part of this step. Next will be running the sample file, which will, and making sure we can draw some shapes and verify the color and orientation. So all this will cover in one sample code. So for that, let's open Arduino and write our code. So this is the sample file that I'm using. This is display framework basic. So this will just display hello world, and so display some shapes and colors on the screen, so that we are sure that our TFT display is working fine, and then so that we can extend our Wi-Fi scanner using this display easily. So here just copy paste this into a new file, or you can download this file from the GitHub. I will point a link in the below description. You can download it from there. So here the two things that you need to note is this TFT init and the TFT invert display and TFT set rotation to 3. Now this you may, in your system, this may not work correctly. You may need to tweak this one based on the output or the default configuration of your display. So we'll discuss further on this one slowly. So but let me run this, compile and run this code and upload this on the ESP32 and show you the output. So the compilation is done, and now it is uploading the code. So upload is complete. So let's see the output on the hardware. So I will switch the camera and then show you. So if you can see the display, so hello digital lab, and then one circle, a rectangle and a button. So this shows that the sample, my sample is running correctly, and the display drivers are set up correctly. All the configurations are right. So the 2 points that I mentioned earlier, that is, one is the rotation, set rotation. So sometime by default you may see this display in a portrait form or a landscape, but in the reverse order. So you can use that set rotation to rotate your screen display accordingly as you need, as per your need. So the one which I have set to set rotation to 3, so that is why it is showing this way. if I make it 1, this will be flipped other way around, rotated. And if it is 1 or 0, you may find something else. So it may display in the portrait form, or 2 may be displaying in another other way. So depending on how your default screen is set up, hardware is set, so that rotation you need to use accordingly. So 1 or 2 trials, hit and trial, like trial and compile and upload, you will get the right orientation. And the invert display that you have that I have shown, that you need to use in case if your like color code is displaying incorrectly. By default I have set to false, which means my background I have set as black, so it is displaying black, and the font is white, so it is displaying white. In case you want to flip this one and invert then you can just use that to true, and if you set background as black, then it will display white. So depending on your how you need to display, you can use accordingly. If you don't use, sometime the display may work it may not work correctly every time. So better to use that command, either false or true. Now let's go back to our system and see the code, further code. Output, this one, so our code is working fine. The few things to keep in note is that depending on the display, the TFT display that you are using, some tweaking you may need to do, or some debugging you may require. This code may not run successfully for the first time. For example, if you're using like the display chip, the default, whether it is ST, whether it is the ILI9341, or whether it is using ST7889 so depending on that, you may need to make some changes. Like in my case, initially I started with this ILI9341 because the display that I had ordered was this one, but the actual hardware is using this display. So sometime, depending you may not, if you are using a generic display, this happens. So I had brought from robo.in, so they are marketing this as ILI9341, but actual display chip that it is used is this one. So you may need to tweak this in your setup, user setup, and accordingly if it should work. So there are 2 other display options that are there, which can be there in your display. If it is not, you may not be having this, either of this, you may having some other chip, that is, if you may be using HX8347. so there are this, sometime it may use ILI9341 compatible, so it may be a clone version of it. So there are 3-4 options that are possible, so you need to change accordingly. So most of the time this or this should work if you're if you have purchased, if you are using if you are in India and you have purchased from robo.in or similar sites. If you are outside India, maybe ILI9341 may work correctly, because most of the parts components in India are made in China, so they are not correctly like marketed based on it looks similar, so they market it accordingly. So now we are done with our episode 2. The actual display is working based on the sample code, and so the library setup and configuration are correct. So we have completed all these steps. So few things that you should keep in mind in your project if you are facing any issue. First thing that I have already mentioned, the display chip, that the actual display, the chip that it is using, if it is something else, your user setup .h need to get updated accordingly. You need to update according to that. Second problem is that some of the TFT display come with 3.3 and some with 5 volt support. So if you are connecting to 3.3 volt, I will suggest first try with 3.3 volt and see if your able to view, if your display is working. If you see a blank screen or maybe it's just blinking, the issue may be that it needs 5 volt. So you need to connect to the 5 volt of ESP32. This was one of the issue that I faced. So in case you are having similar issue, you can just change from 3.3 to 5 volt. Rest you don't need to make any change. I think this is all good. Second problem that you can face is that some of the wiring, if you do some mismatch in the wiring, just cross verify this whether you are connecting to the right GPIO pin, because in ESP32 the pin numbers are very small. There is a high probability that you can incorrectly connect it to some other pin. So use the proper pin numbers, GPIO pins, and also make sure if you are using GPIO the ESP32 with 38 pin, or either you are using with the 32 pin, there may be some difference in the layout. So just make sure that your the wiring is correct. That is one of the possibility of error coming up. Third, which I have already mentioned, or that is the first thing, your display screen, if you are getting the display but your orientation is not correct, so maybe you need to use the set rotation. So that this set rotation, so you may start with 0 as a first with 0 and then see whether what is your rotation, and accordingly you can just try 0 1 2 3. It should somehow one of the value will work perfectly. Third, the fourth point is this invert display. In case your if you don't use this line, sometime your display may invert, like the text color is white but that may show as black, and fill screen is black but it may show as white. So you need to use invert display option so that your display is correct and not inverting. If you are still watching this video up to here, do subscribe to my channel and give it like. Hope this will help you in your projects, and you are able to build this successfully. Thank you again.